Hello, my name is Pieter-Adriaan Stofberg. This is the second part of my discussion about online teaching. In the first video, I spoke about our likes and dislikes of online teaching, things we wished we knew earlier, and our definition of a meaningful online lesson. In this part of the discussion, I will touch on how we had to change or adjust our teaching methods to be effective in an online environment, how we developed as teachers, and how our students progressed. So let's jump right into our teaching methods that we had to change. One of the main components that we had to incorporate in our teaching method is to use more descriptive language. Under normal circumstances, we could rely on our ability to demonstrate and count on the student to make their own observations and to apply it in their own playing. Most of us found that making short videos for our students was very helpful for several reasons. Firstly, the sound and the image quality is much clearer than in a recorded video than a live online lesson. Secondly, you can send several recordings demonstrating in different tempi, analyze shifts, and movement of the bow, posture, and give them tips on how to practice certain sections. Thirdly, they can watch this video as many times as they want, and they can even play along with it. And lastly, for the beginners or newer students, it gave them and their parents a better idea of what pieces needed to sound like, how the movements looked, and what they had to do on their own. So not only did I send videos, my students had to send me videos back, demonstrating that they understand what I showed in the video that I sent. So very similar to the 100 days of practice challenge that we see on social media, I asked them to send me daily videos. And throughout the week, I would give them feedback, and that worked so well. I'm still using it because their progress and the results during the lockdown was so positive. I decided to keep it going because it motivated them and it gave them structure to their practicing and helped to settle their practice routine at home. And also from a performance aspect, it's also very useful for us to record ourselves and for the students to record themselves, because the camera is so unforgiving. You can hear every little scratch or mistake or anything that you want to change, and it gives you the opportunity to make those improvements. So I only worked from my cell phone because I found it to be a very versatile tool. I could pick it up, I could move it closer to my hand, to my bow, show my bow arm more clearly, and the student could do the same. And that I liked that it was a versatile tool. So what I liked to use was an old wire stand, and then at the back of my phone I have a pop socket, and that I would hook in behind one of the wires, and I could tilt it and move it so that you could see better. I'm going to show you that in a second. So for some of our beginners that barely started, they started in January, February, and the lockdown came in effect in March. So they barely started. And some of them were used to having lessons in groups, which was obviously more fun for them, and they had the support of their friends. So we had to work extra hard to keep up the fun factor, especially for the beginners. So Barbara Kennedy told me that she used a lot of quizzes. So I'm guessing note names and spot the wrong thing that I'm doing. And she said that if the pupil beats the teacher by 1,000,000 points, then you have accomplished your mission. So at the end of the day, we had to make sure that the little ones had fun in their lessons. And we had to compromise progress for the sake of engagement and just enjoy the process. And for a beginner to start with a bow grip is very, very difficult and a massive challenge for the teacher, and to show how the bow moves. So here's what I did. Let me show you the wire stand firstly. So here is my wire stand, and I would hook it in behind. Yes. And then you're able to see more of me playing. So what I would do is I would say, okay, describe the room to me. Let's say now we're showing them how to use the bow. Describe the room to me. And they'd say, oh yeah, there's a window, and there's a picture of my family, and there's the windowsill is over there, and I've got a table, and I've got a bag. And I was like, okay, cool. Imagine that there's a laser shining out of the tip of your bow, and aim for the A on the A string. Aim that towards the corner of the room, or to the window, or to the tree outside. And I would say, okay, follow that through to the tree, and all the way through. And then for the D string, I'd say, okay, go to the windowsill. And try and keep it as straight and the laser as focused on that spot as possible. And for the G string, maybe go to the bottom of the curtain. And for the C string, aim towards your bag. And that helped so much, especially if a parent helped them. And what I would do, you see, now versatile tool, I'm able to pick up the phone and show. So what I would do is say, okay, put your bow on the bridge and just roll it. And then I was able to tell them, okay, so notice how when you move, the arm is moving forward more than moving up. So because it's moving forward, then that also helps that angle of the bow. Okay, resuming. Teaching became more focused. I found that there was less chatting with the student, really, because we just wanted to get through the work and make sure that they would make the progress. With the less chatting, I was very worried at the beginning of lockdown in March that my students would think that the lessons are not good enough, and the parents might think, oh no, the student's not making progress. So initially, when I would say new pieces, I would fill in as much information as possible, fingering, bowing, position that I had to play in, because I just wanted them to be able to play it, and like with the amount of information in the piece, they would be able to play it perfectly the first time. And I realized after 2 weeks that it's not a good idea, because I'm robbing the student of the opportunity to figure things out for themselves. And even though you don't see progress in that 30-minute lesson, maybe immediately, I found that when the students returned, their approach to learning new pieces was a lot more independent in their starting off with it. And that was great. They were figuring out their own fingering, their own bowing, checking what position they want to play it in, and just gently guiding from the side. And that was fantastic. A good tip for this online business, and to help with rhythmical accuracy and intonation, is to to mute yourself on your video call, so the student can't hear you, but you can hear the student, and then to play along, and then you can see and hear where the student is playing out of tune, and vice versa. The student mutes themselves, and no, sorry. So the student mutes themselves, and then you can check the intonation, because then they can check the intonation because they're playing along with you. So it works because you would sidestep the delay in sound. And thank you, Mariette Schumann, for that one. I wouldn't have been able to figure that one out. Students became more aware of the things that teachers look at. So, for example, in an in-person lesson, if you see the student is playing and their arm is lifting up like this, you would very easily just extend it while they're playing, and then they just take it and it just keeps going. But now you had to verbalize it. So they became more involved in the teaching process. So instead of just doing it, you now had to give an explanation. When you had to ask to be shown something specific, so I would say, okay, show me how you're doing this. Or move your camera to the bridge so I can see what you're doing. They would take more part in the learning process and take more responsibility for their own learning, and that really helped them to develop as musicians. So the next part of my lecture, I will talk about how we developed as teachers. Patience, tolerance, understanding, enthusiasm and praise, tempered with the right amount of discipline, is what works for me. That's what Barbara Kennedy said. Someone commented that they learned a lot about online procedures and different platforms and the possibilities that are available. We were forced to really listen to the student because of the bad sound quality and the video and the sound not always lining up. We had to learn to work with simple explanations for complex techniques. We had to let go of certain expectations, and our standards we had to lower maybe just a little bit because some things were just impossible to teach online. We had to think on our feet and again acknowledge that every student is unique and every student requires a different approach. And it was even more relevant and clear in an online lesson. Everyone had to be more organized, sending sheet music beforehand, keeping track of which device you need to call and on what platform the student needs to work on. You need to keep track of lesson times, the staggered return of students. So some students would have school on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and the other half on Tuesday and Thursday, and next week they swap. So the timetable became very complicated. And also we needed to keep track of the ESCOM load shedding schedule, because even though if you don't have load shedding, your student might have load shedding. So it was very, very challenging. Also, we had to be more sensitive to the student's mental state, and be aware that that has a huge influence on the lesson and their progress. And I think a lot of teachers learned not to underestimate their students and to realize that they're capable of more than what we think they are. So moving on to their progress, and this is the last question that I had for my colleagues. So in my experience, my grade 2s and 3s, I would maybe start with a grade 1 if they're very musical, but I prefer working with my beginners being a grade 2 or grade 3. So that's 8 and 9 years old. Some of them did really well and others really struggled. Children with 1 or 2 years of experience did quite well. The high schoolers did very well with the online lessons, but it was very difficult to teach them sound shaping and nuancing and tone color. So the general feeling that I got from my colleagues is that their students progressed much better than they expected, while some really struggled with the online learning. Unfortunately, there was no clear dividing factor between the successful ones and the ones who really struggled. So I think that might be something that's worth exploring. Some said that they worried about the students coming back with bad habits that creeped in during the lockdown because we couldn't see the full picture and they didn't have supervision. And there were some technical gaps in their playing when they came back because you couldn't see everything through the camera. And at the end of the day, their progress was limited by the type of interaction we could have with them. Students became more independent, as I mentioned earlier, because they had to count on their own, write in their own fingering and bowing. Spoon feeding was less or much less than that they were used to. So they had to figure out a lot of it by themselves. Music teachers didn't have to compete with extra mural activities. So most students had more time to practice and practice more regularly. Then, of course, those who practiced did better. With everyone moving their lives online, it meant that they came into contact with amazing teachers on YouTube and performers, and we could recommend videos to them that they had to watch. And they also came into contact with online musical stars like the guys from Two Set Violin, Brett and Eddie from Melbourne. And that really helped to motivate them and show them that there are other people, young people, who also play and have the same problems that they do. And I think that really inspired them and kept them going. So in conclusion, I think with everyone being forced to teach online, it made our students more independent musicians, and our music lessons gave them motivation and purpose to get off the couch and stop watching TV and stop lounging around, especially in those first 3 weeks of lockdown. And our lessons contributed to their routine and keeping them disciplined. In musical households, families played and made music together, and there was a very large divide between students who could cope with the isolation and others who struggled being cut off from their friends and family and physical contact. And I think we all became more sensitive to that. And I think it's something that's worth exploring and seeing how we could help with that if we should go into another lockdown. I want to thank all of my colleagues, my teachers, my friends, everyone who contributed their knowledge to this lecture. And they are Professor Anne-Marie van der Westhuizen, Helga van der Merwe, Estelle Lowe, Emile de Roubaix, Sarah Duplessis, Lilika Potgieter, Graham Alexander, Mariette Schumann, Juliana de Tooy, Candice Brewis, Dr. Pieter Martens and Dr. Suzanne Martens, Barbara Kennedy, Cheryl de Havilland, Micah Skyn, Teresa Berger-Mills, and Rina Skutte. Thank you all, you're fantastic. I hope this discussion was helpful to you and might have inspired you to think differently about online teaching or just to appreciate teaching in person again. Thank you very much.